Hello, all you freedom-loving people. President Trump laid down the tracks for a deal with Ukraine. He gave a green light for the pipeline from Alberta to restart construction, and he will offer a $5 million gold card to investors in the U.S. Okay, let's get into it. President Trump is planning major reforms for immigrant investors. He is proposing a new gold card immigrant investor program, and he is preparing to significantly raise the investment threshold. He also intends to eliminate the existing EB-5 program within 2 weeks.
We're going to be selling a gold card. You have a green card. This is a gold card. We're going to be putting a price on that card of about $5 million, and that's going to give you green card privileges plus. It's going to be a route to citizenship, and wealthy people will be coming into our country by buying this card. They'll be wealthy, and they'll be successful, and they'll be spending a lot of money and paying a lot of taxes and employing a lot of people, and we think it's going to be extremely successful.
President Trump said the rich can enter the U.S. and run their businesses in the U.S. after having a gold card. They must also pay taxes to the U.S. like ordinary citizens. President Trump also mentioned that maybe some big tech companies like Apple would be willing to buy gold cards for exceptionally talented foreign students from Ivy League schools so that they can work for American companies. President Trump's goal is to sell 1 million gold cards or more. Then the U.S. will use the money to pay down U.S. debts. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said they'll have to go through vetting, of course, to make sure they're wonderful, world-class global citizens. Then they can come to America. President Trump can give them a green card and they can invest in America, and we can use that money to reduce our deficit. Lutnick later explained that the Trump administration plans to terminate the EB-5 immigrant investor program within 2 weeks and to replace it with the gold card program. The current EB-5 program requires would-be investors to invest a little over $1 million and create at least 10 jobs, and it also puts investors on a pathway to a green card and later citizenship. Lutnick blasted the EB-5 program, calling it full of nonsense and as a way to get a green card that was low-priced. Lutnick noted that those applying for the card will have to go through vetting, of course. Once cleared, gold card holders can then invest in the United States. The Trump administration is also fast-tracking government downsizing. Today, Russell Vought, the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget, and Charles Ezel, the acting director of the Office of Personnel Management, the OPM, issued a memo. The memo said that as a part of this effort, agency leaders shall promptly undertake preparations to initiate large-scale reductions in force. So federal agencies have been ordered to prepare and to submit Phase 1 agency RIF reduction in force and reorganization plans by March 13th. There is also a Phase 2 plan which focuses on long-term government downsizing, on office consolidation, and on relocation of agency functions to lower-cost areas. Phase 2 plans should be submitted by April 14th. The memo from Vought and Ezel also directs agency heads to collaborate with DOGE on developing workforce reduction plans. During President Trump's first cabinet meeting at the White House with department heads today, he mentioned the recent email that was sent by DOGE through the OPM's account to federal workers that requires employees to respond. Otherwise, it would be assumed that they resigned.
But we've requested that a lot of people, we want to make sure that the people are working. So letters were sent out, and I think everyone at this table is very much behind it. And if they aren't, I'd want them to speak up, but they're very much behind it. Letters were sent out to people just to find out if the people exist. Do they work? Who do they work for? Where are they? Where have they been working? Have they been working for other companies or other entities at all? Or being paid by the government, so they have 2 jobs, but they're supposed to have 1. And the letter asks some simple questions like, what have you done lately? And if they can answer that, because I can tell you everything I've done for the last long period of time, a lot more than a week. And in many cases, we haven't gotten responses. Usually that means that maybe that person doesn't exist, or that person doesn't want to say they're working for another company while being paid by the United States government. So there's a lot of interesting things. It's very unique, but we have a very unique situation.
During the meeting, Elon Musk said that about 1 million workers responded to the OPM email, and Musk said that another similar email would be forthcoming. A federal judge in Seattle on Tuesday wrote an order to try and block President Trump's executive order that was suspending the U.S. refugee resettlement program. U.S. District Judge Jamal Whitehead remarked that while the president has broad powers over who comes into the country, he cannot repeal the law passed by Congress that established the program. After hearing arguments on Tuesday, Whitehead said the president has substantial discretion to suspend refugee admissions, but that authority is not limitless. The lawsuit was filed by 9 refugees and their family members in the United States, including a family from the Democratic Republic of Congo. They were previously allowed to travel to the U.S. on January 22nd, but then they had to cancel their trip. The family, who lives in Nairobi, Kenya, sold all of their belongings except for those that could fit into their check-in baggage, and they had to give up the lease on their home. The plaintiffs also include major refugee aid groups who had to lay off staff because the administration froze funding for processing refugee applications overseas as well as support. President Trump suspended refugee resettlement immediately after taking office on January 20th. This was because cities and communities had been taxed by record levels of migration, and they don't have the ability to absorb large numbers of migrants, and in particular refugees. So now President Trump has asked the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Secretary of State to submit a report within 90 days to determine whether the refugee program should be reactivated. President Trump said that U.S. and Ukraine officials have reached a consensus on the terms of the mineral agreement. President Trump told reporters, "I hear he's coming on Friday," referring to Zelensky. President Trump described the deal as being worth up to $1 trillion. He said the American taxpayer is now going to get their money back plus. He also mentioned the same topic during his first cabinet meeting.
President Zelensky is going to be coming on Friday. That's now confirmed, and we're going to be signing an agreement which will be a very big agreement. And I want to thank Howard and Scott for the job you guys did in putting it together. You really did an amazing job. And that'll be on rare earth and other things. And as you know, we're in for probably $350 billion. Europe is in for $100 billion. And that's a big difference. So we're in for probably 3 times as much, and yet it's very important to everybody, but Europe's very close. We have a big ocean separating us, so it's very important for Europe, and they hopefully will step up and do maybe more than they're doing, and maybe a lot more.
Prior to President Trump's confirmation, it has been reported that the draft of the deal does not make explicit provisions for any U.S. security agreements or continued military aid. But the U.S. does want to safeguard Ukraine's freedom, sovereignty, and security. President Trump has said that Ukraine will need some form of peacekeeping force if an agreement is reached in order to end the war. And future arms supplies are still being discussed between the U.S. and Ukraine. Olha Stefanishyna, Ukraine's deputy prime minister who is leading the negotiations, told the Financial Times on Tuesday that the deal goes beyond minerals and is part of a bigger picture that will deepen Ukraine's ties with the United States. Ukrainian officials told the Associated Press that the U.S. has made concessions in the mineral deal negotiations, dropping its original demand that Ukraine provide resources worth $500 billion. In the new draft mineral agreement, the U.S. and Ukraine will jointly hold a reconstruction investment fund, which will collect proceeds from Ukraine's state-owned resources, including minerals, hydrocarbons, and other extractable resources. After deducting operating costs, Ukraine would contribute 50% of the proceeds to the fund until the cumulative amount reaches $500 billion, and the U.S. has pledged long-term financial support to help Ukraine build a stable and economically prosperous country. Zelensky may also directly appeal to President Trump for continued U.S. support when he meets with him at the White House on Friday. The 62nd plenary session of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change opened on Monday in Hangzhou, Zhejiang Province, China. Representatives from the 195 member governments of the panel will discuss the schedules and financial plan for the next phase. the Trump administration has not only withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement, but has also halted the participation of U.S. scientists in major UN climate change assessments. The leftist media and climate change advocates are attacking the Trump administration's policies, from reopening oil and gas development to plans to dismantle some environmental departments. This is because the U.S. government's policy shift has already had a sizable impact on the climate change movement. Major U.S. banks from Wall Street, such as J.P. Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs, quit the Net Zero Banking Alliance, the NZBA, in late 2024 and early 2025. The NZBA is a group of global banks that are committed to reducing carbon emissions through their investments. Without the investment of major U.S. banks, the scope of NZBA's activities and influence would be greatly affected. However, according to the Nikkei Asia Review, the activities of the Paris Climate Agreement are mostly just empty talk. The Paris Climate Agreement stipulates that parties must update their nationally determined contributions, or NDC, carbon reduction plans every 5 years. The current deadline is mid-February. However, as of December 24th, only 16 of the 195 state parties had published updated targets in the NDC registry. More than 90% of state parties are overdue. An analysis by the British website Carbon Brief shows that countries that have not updated their autonomous contributions account for about 80% of global emissions. And the Paris Climate Agreement gives countries broad discretion to set their own targets. No penalties will be imposed on countries that miss deadlines or fail to meet their targets. So it's no wonder that the Trump administration is pulling out of this agreement. And while the IPCC is meeting, President Trump is thinking about how he can supply more oil. In a Monday evening post on his Truth Social platform, President Trump wrote, "I was just thinking that the company building the Keystone XL pipeline that was viciously jettisoned by the incompetent Biden administration should come back to America and get it built now." President Trump said that his administration would provide an easy approval process and would be able to start construction almost immediately. President Trump didn't mention the name of the company in his post. He only mentioned the company that was building the pipeline earlier in the day. This is because the situation with this company has changed. Keystone XL was set to carry tar sands oil from Alberta, Canada to the Gulf Coast. This project was first proposed in 2008, but environmentalists have opposed the construction of the pipeline for years, saying that it is unnecessary and will hinder the U.S. transition to cleaner fuels. The project was delayed due to the opposition from U.S. landowners, Native American tribes, and environmentalists. President Trump had approved a permit to build the pipeline in 2017, but Biden revoked the permit for the project shortly after taking office in 2021. TC Energy Corp, the company responsible for building the pipeline at the time, called off the project in 2021. Then, in October of last year, TC Energy Corp spun off its oil pipeline business into a new company called South Bow Energy. In a statement to The Hill, a spokesperson for South Bow said, "We've moved on from the Keystone XL project. We continue to engage with customers to develop options to increase Canadian oil supplies to meet growing demand." But President Trump wrote, "Easy approvals, almost immediate start. If not them, perhaps another pipeline company." After the announcement of the German election results, the direction of the transatlantic relationship between Europe and the United States has been closely scrutinized, especially when the new would-be Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, has consistently said that he will not work with the alternative for Germany, the conservative AfD party. The CDU, which is the coalition party led by Merz, gained the top spot in the election, and the CDU is considered center-right. Its former leader, Angela Merkel, served as Chancellor of Germany for 16 years, from 2005 to 2021. During her reign, Merkel implemented Europe's largest refugee resettlement program from the Middle East. Merz opposed Merkel's liberalization of immigration, and Merz campaigned as a supposed immigration hardliner, and he appeared to be following the tradition of notionally right-wing politicians. Ahead of the election, Merz put forward a plan to increase deportations and to enact strict border restrictions in order to prevent illegal migrants from entering Germany from other EU nations. This included those who claimed to be asylum seekers. However, hours after his party won Germany's federal election, Merz began to soften his stance on immigration. He said that such measures should only be temporary. And on Monday, Merz claimed, "None of us want to close the borders." Even though the current ruling SPD party was completely rejected by the German voters on Sunday, since Merz seems intent on continuing to avoid the AfD's firewall, their new cabinet partners will have to be the SPD and another small party, probably the Greens. The AfD party has taken a tougher stance on immigration policy, calling for the deportation of illegal immigrants. The ADF is more right-wing than the CDU. The ADF is often labeled by the mainstream media as extreme right-wing and as dangerous to democracy. The SPD that is currently in power is left of center. SPD leader Lars Klingbeil said on Monday that he expects that Merz will change his course and his tone significantly from the campaign if he hopes to form a government with the left-wing party. The SPD will also likely look to pressure Merz to ignore Germany's limits on debt, and it seeks to expand welfare and funding for Ukraine. If Merz continues to marginalize AfD, this is likely to be detrimental to EU-US relations. The AfD's framework is the closest to President Trump's agenda, and it is the most supported by the Trump team. Merz also said that the U.S. is not its primary concern. He argued that J.D. Vance's Munich speech and other signals from President Trump suggest that the current U.S. administration doesn't care much about the fate of Europe. After his victory on Sunday, he said his absolute priority was to strengthen Europe as quickly as possible so that Germany could truly realize its freedom from American dependence. Nevertheless, he reiterated his commitment to maintain a strong relationship with the United States. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember that every like, comment, and share helps more people to see the truth. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you have already subscribed, we thank you, but please double check to make sure that you're still subscribed, because some of our audience have reported that they're somehow unsubscribed without their knowledge. We've also heard that many of you don't get notifications of our videos anymore on YouTube. So when you do subscribe on YouTube, please make sure to tap the notification bell as well. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth.